As is the case with the second commandment, which includes the fact that this commandment will not go unpunished, so too the third commandment includes a few more details with regard to why this commandment is important and who is bound by this commandment, not only as a matter of obedience, but who is privileged to be included by this particular commandment from God. And the third commandment reads, "Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. 6 days you may labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God." Here God commands his people to take their rest one day of the week, particularly the seventh day of the week. And the reasons that the commandment gives is actually different between the commandment as presented in the book of Exodus and the commandment as presented in the book of Deuteronomy. In both of those cases, God calls upon not only his creation, but what has just happened in his relationship with his holy people. In the book of Exodus, it reads, "In 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord has blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." In the book of Deuteronomy, however, there's a slight difference. God states, "For remember that you too were once slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you from there with his strong hand and outstretched arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." So what has just happened in the history of God's relationship with his people Israel? He has just liberated them from a life of slavery in Egypt. He has assured them that he is bringing them to their own land, where he has promised them, "You will till your own soil, you will reap your own crops, you will work your own land, you will rest under your own fig tree." No longer would they work for a pharaoh or a king who oppresses them and takes the yield of their work, but rather they work to build up their own human dignity, the dignity of their own families that they care for, and together as a nation to build up the dignity, the wealth, and the strength of themselves as a people with a covenant with God. But at the same time, God does not want them to be enslaved by anything else, including their work. So God gives as a command, but also as a gift, the third commandment, in which they must keep the Sabbath rest. Now for the Hebrew people, it is reminiscent of God's creation, in which God created the world in 6 days, and on the Sabbath he rested. For us as Christians, we remember God's creation, but also that final step in God's creation, in which everything was fulfilled in the resurrection of Jesus. And so for us, the day of rest is not Saturday, but rather Sunday, the day in which Jesus rose from the dead, which the church teaches is the day after the Sabbath day, which is in fact the first day of the week, the day in which God began his creation, and the day in which he created the world anew in the resurrection of Christ. And so either way, we are called to take a day of rest, in which we build up the community of faith, and we take some time to worship God in the midst of a day he has given us as a day of rest, to show that while we raise our own human dignity by our work, we are not slaves to that work, but we are commanded by God by receiving a gift from God in taking that day of rest. Another feature and classification of this commandment is to whom does it apply, and who is privileged to be included in this command of God. In both the book of Exodus and the book of Deuteronomy, God spells out who is bound and included in this commandment he has given his holy people. "No work may be done either by you or your son or daughter, or your male or female slave, or your beast of burden, or by the alien who lives with you. So we have worked into the commandment itself who this commandment applies to. Neither you, your son or daughter, nor your male or female slave. Believe it or not, there were slaves in the kingdom of Israel, but more along the line of indentured servants. But when you think about what God's command entails, even the slave, even the servant, for 1 day a week, is raised to the dignity of their masters. Not even the alien that is among you may work on that day. So even the foreigner who is not among the holy people of God may work on that day. So this is very much a universal commandment for everybody. But God doesn't stop there. Not even your beast of burden may work on that day. So in many ways you can say God is the first animal rights activist. Even the beasts of burden take a day of rest, and they are raised to that dignity of all people when the holy day of the Sabbath is observed. If this third commandment is universal to all people, how much more are the other commandments of the Decalogue universal to all people of all places and all times?